welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 106. Put that away. It's not Christmas yet. Episode number 164, although I can't wait. I like Christmas. It's good fun. Good fun. Buying lots of presents at the moment for all the nieces and nephews. I got a wonderful book on like science experiments for one of my nephews. I think he's going to enjoy that. Ah, yes, having a skeptic for an uncle. There you go. Episode number 164 for the 10th of December 2011. Richard Saunders here from Sydney, Australia. Today on the show, we're going to be talking with Dr. Rob Morrison. Now, Dr. Morrison, Australians will remember, was one of the guys in the Curiosity Show, a fabulous science show for kids and how to make things and how to do things in years past. Speaking to him today about an article he wrote for the Punch online, thepunch.com.au, entitled, "This is the Dawning of the New Age of Superstition." He's quite worried about the encroaching quackery, and particularly worried about the chiropractors. That's coming up, first interview on today's show. Following that, we've got a very strange segment sent to me by someone claiming to be Brian Donut. Not sure about this one, but I thought I'd better play it. Yeah, a segment coming up with Brian Donut. That's in the middle of the show. And to wrap up the show, I interviewed a good old friend of mine and a good friend of the Skeptic Zone, Dr. Paul Willis. Dr. Paul Willis, who until recently was one of the frontmen of the ABC TV science show Catalyst. Now he's working at the Royal Institution of Australia in Adelaide. Bringing science to people and people to science is their motto. We're going to find out what he's been up to and the work of the institution. And speaking of Maynard, which we weren't, Maynard, as you know, is going to be at TAM 10 in Las Vegas. Well, that's the hope, that's the plan. TAM or bust. Las Vegas or bust for Maynard. If you want to help Maynard, you can always simply chip into the Skeptic Zone, because a lot of that money will go to help Maynard get that plane ticket. Or you can bid on Maynard's Classics 95 to 2000 double CD set, along with a signed copy of Septoid 3 by Brian Dunning, signed by Brian Dunning and yours truly, Richard Saunders, because I wrote the foreword. Both those items are up for bid as a sort of double set. Now, if you follow the links from the Skeptic Zone webpage, or you subscribe to our newsletter, you can easily click on the links there. Or if you go to eBay, just run a search for Maynard Classics and Septoid 3. Autographed by Maynard, Dunning and Saunders. Yes, everything's autographed. Maynard's double CD sets autographed by Maynard, and Septoid's autographed by Brian and myself. That's how you can help Maynard get to TAM in Las Vegas. It's always a plane flying over when I'm recording this, folks. I live near the flight path, and it's quiet all day, I promise you. And I start to record for the Skeptic Zone, and suddenly, there's one now. I think it's nearly gone. No, it's still there. Maybe it's circling. Maybe they knew I was doing this. I'm going to go away and ponder that. I am. And I'm not even going to have a drink this week, because I'm that sort of guy. You can go, why don't you all run downstairs, grab a drink of your favourite, whatever it is, run back upstairs, and we can all enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And we have Dr. Rob Morrison on the line now. Hello, Rob.
G'day, how are you?
I'm doing really well. So, it seems a bit of a hornet's nest has been stirred up with the article which has been published at thepunch.com.au by yourself entitled, "This is the Dawning of the New Age of Superstition." And, of course, the thrust of your whole piece on the Punch there is how non-science is not just creeping into the door, it's sort of here already and making itself at home, especially when it comes to medical care.
Yes, I must say that wasn't my title. When I submitted it, my title was Check Your Medical Bullshit Meter, but they changed it for some reason. But that was indeed the thrust of it. It's a worrying development. It's not only that non-science is creeping into areas which rightfully ought to be scientific.
Yeah.
It's that the people who are practicing these, while they claim that their own sort of alternative pursuit is fine, are nonetheless, as quickly as they can, adopting the trappings of science to give themselves a spurious respectability. Witness the chiropractors' onslaught on government, so they can now call themselves doctor.
Yeah, and this is a very, very good example, actually, that you've brought up here with the chiropractors, and I know it's one of the main arguments or main features of the piece you've written, is to the vast majority of the public, I dare say, regard chiropractic as another legitimate branch of the medical profession. And
it's a troubling one because, of course, chiropractic itself is split into two camps. There's the one which is the kind of orthodox one, which goes in for all the subluxation and mystical, sort of almost spiritual stuff about what happens in the spine, and it's completely untestable. And the other group, they don't go in for that, and they're much more interested in the kind of physical aspect of manipulating the spine. But of course, if you keep going down that route and you're good at it, you might as well be a physiotherapist. What's the need for another pursuit which has at its basis all this nonsensical kind of mystical carry-on?
Yes, and that's absolutely right. And of course, this is the point which I use the term the majority of the public, I think that is the case. They simply do not know that there is this area of chiropractic which is basically based on magical thinking. And
I suppose it's more than that. I mean, there are some good spinal manipulators amongst the chiropractics. I wouldn't deny that, and some of them are good at treating what they do. But if they are good at treating what they do because they're manipulating bones and joints just as bones and joints, why not call it that? Why dress it up as something which is really has its roots in something which is deeply unscientific, and also goes along on things like the chiropractic website to say they can cure 95% of illnesses. And, you tackle, they say, oh, we don't really believe that, but, there's no clear indication that they're backing away from it, certainly as a body.
And they're promoting the fact that they want to be considered in the forefront of healthcare. And
that's right.
And this word crops up again and again when I'm looking at these sort of people and their views, is the word wellness.
Yes. Well, it's peculiar, and it's a difficult issue because, I'm not, and I think others are not saying you shouldn't go and see them. By all means, go and see them. Our protest is that science has a very definite meaning. Science isn't a body of knowledge which is sort of right or wrong. Science is a way of testing any claim, whether it's physiotherapy or medicine or drugs or anything. It's actually a system by which you can weed out and test what is asserted. Now, it, of course, like democracy, is not perfect in that some people will get one result and some will get another. But the thing is self-regulating in that if you get people who run the same experiment and they get results that disagree, you've got to sort that out. So the thing is constantly refining itself towards what is accurate. Now, that is what science is. It's a method of testing assertion. But to be testable, you've got to be able to be framed in a way that is testable. And it's not testable, for example, to say God exists. He may or may not, but you can't test it empirically. So it's not a scientific statement. And you certainly can test whether or not a drug works because you set up clinical trials and you run your experiments and you find out that way. That's scientific. But you can't test whether somebody's got a kind of mystical force in the backbone which, directed by certain procedures, will cause this or that effect. It's just not testable. So it's inherently an unscientific practice if you cannot set up a testable hypothesis.
Which, of course, happens again and again, and we can even think about the other vaguely labeled Eastern modalities which talk about various types of energy. And I think you make the point in your article that the word energy is certainly not used in any meaningful sense too.
No, well, it's a lovely sort of vague catchphrase. It used to be vibrations.
Yes.
But, you know, people talk about the energy they get from crystal. Oh, what damned energy? There's a sound, light. I mean, it's a nonsense phrase. And it's also an untestable phrase, so therefore it's non-science. And my quarrel with these things is that they say, well, you can't test it, and it's true, and it's science. That's not what determines what science is. I mean, to say that the world is flat is a more scientific statement than to say subluxation causes mystical forces to do things in your backbone, because you can test whether the world is flat.
Right.
So it's a scientific statement, although it's wrong, because it is amenable to testing by science.
Yeah.
But if I say, my dog knows what I'm thinking, it's really not testable, so it's not a scientific statement, although it may be true.
Another point you're bringing up, of course, is that these people seem to be gaining somewhat more acceptance, especially when they can call themselves doctor.
Yes, and that's worrying, because it's like the anti-evolutionists. Now, by all means, believe that, but if you're going to believe that, don't go around calling yourself a creation scientist, because at the same time as you are denying the validity of what science tells you, and that's evolution, you are nonetheless wanting to assume its respectability by taking its name. And it's a bastardization of the word science to apply it to stuff which is inherently unscientific. Now, in the same way, I think if you're going to be non-orthodox and deny the scientific processes that medicine and pharmacology and physiotherapy, however imperfectly, must eventually rest upon, if you're going to deny those, don't then assume the trappings of wanting to call yourself doctor.
Yeah.
And it's this steady sort of parasitism of orthodoxy, whilst at the same time denying that orthodoxy has the answers, that is worrying. And it also is confusing, because people in the general public go along and they see somebody called doctor, and they don't know now if they're dealing with somebody who's got a PhD or is a dentist or a vet or a chiropractor or a plumber. The self-awarded title to give yourself the respectability that other people have earned is, I think, an improper one.
And as you point out in your article, of course, that this has been a long struggle politically for the chiropractors, whereas a real doctor has a long struggle academically to actually learn the disciplines.
Well, that's right. It's a meaningful academic term. It is slightly bedeviled, I might say, by the fact that those who have a PhD, which is a non-medical degree, are legitimately doctors because that's a doctorate. Whereas doctors, it's actually a courtesy title. A medical doctor has usually a Bachelor of Surgery and a Bachelor of Medicine, but no actual doctorate. But we do accept that doctor is a title we use for medicos, but it's not helped by broadening it into almost everything under the sun.
I guess in a way it's a similar sort of thing that happens that when one walks into a pharmacy and looks at the shelf and can pick up a box of magic pills, because you're in the pharmacy, there is a certain assumption on your part that they must they must work in some respect.
Well, yes, and that's a very good point, because in fact and they've been criticised for, in fact, bundling some of the alternative and now demonstrably harmful so-called natural remedies. Some of them have been demonstrated to be so harmful. Some of them are certainly harmful if they're taken wrongly, and some of them are completely ineffective. But there they sit alongside the prescription counter, and there's no distinction made. And I mean, I've done pharmacology, and I have trouble sometimes working out what's legit and what's not. So God knows how you get on if you haven't done any.
You are at the mercy, and that's probably a little harsher term to use, or a harsh way to say it. You're at the mercy of the person behind the counter if you go in there and asking for advice. And I can tell you from first-hand experience that that's a crapshoot. You get a mixed bag. I've had the advice from somebody working in a pharmacy that homeopathy works by metaphysics. And, well, luckily I know what's what in this situation, but to a mother walking in with a crying baby, or someone looking for some medicine for their sick children, or whatever the case may be, they're at the mercy of somebody behind the desk who may not know what the hell they're talking about.
That can also be a problem with other orthodox practices. For example, I mean, I'm not sure whether it's the same in Australia as it is in America, but I suspect it's close. But you're dealing with close to half the population of medicos who either don't believe in evolution or believe in creation. I think a report came out the other day that showed that 2/3 of medical students didn't know when to wash their hands.
Yeah.
So you actually have big problems within orthodoxy of people, because I think we don't train them very well, in some cases. Sometimes they themselves are not clear about the scientific basis of their practice. And they can't be. I mean, if you've got medicos who are nonetheless recommending anti-scientific procedures, then you've got a bit of a conflict there, and sort of that doesn't help. That certainly doesn't help their patients sort out what they're supposed to be doing. And because so few people do science, and because we in science haven't, I think, promoted our discipline and how it works very well, most people have absolutely no idea what you mean by evidence-based, by peer review, by testable hypothesis. I mean, these are just arcane phrases to people, but they lie at the heart of what is and what isn't scientific.
Well, a lot of people, in my experience, who are ignorant as to what science is, simply regard it as another belief system. And I've had that thrown at me many times.
That's right. And you know, this sort of postmodern age, one is as good as another.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you are entitled to believe one or the other, but one, if it adheres to the principles of the testable principles of science, can legitimately be called science, and that which cannot adhere to those cannot. I mean, my students, when I was training teachers, had a great deal of trouble with this. If you said, should you teach creationism in the science class? And half of them did what journalists did, and said, oh, you've got to keep an open mind and provide both sides of the story.
Right.
Now, both sides of the story are not equal. If you have, for example, the same thing is true of this hideous anti-vaccination network. If you say to a journalist, you've got to provide both sides of the story, they'll get a professor of vaccination on one side, and then they'll say, well, who's the other side? And they go and pick any loony they like who opposes vaccination and equate them and give them equal time. I mean, if you say that the world is round, does that mean you've got to go and find a flat earther and give them equal time? It's a silly attempt to balance a huge weight of accumulated and verified evidence against somebody who just has a crackpot theory.
But it does make for entertaining television.
It makes for entertaining television, and also the code of ethics for journalists says you've got to provide another point of view.
Yeah.
And so doing the best they can, when they don't know what is a legitimate point of view, they'll go and find an opponent. And the opponents, who are, many of them, of course, in the alternative brigade, are very skilled at manipulating media and lobbying and advertising. And you find advertisements for these natural therapies because they have no ethical restrictions on advertising their services, whereas doctors and lawyers have many.
Yeah.
So it's a very uneven battle for the public mind, and one which is being skillfully won by people who have more to gain by winning the lobbying battle than by acquiring scientifically based skills. The other thing is, of course, and it puzzles me, is why people seem more prone to believe the unorthodox and the alternative than the verifiable. And there does seem to be, with a number of people, quite a distinct preference for that. Just as, you know, there are a lot of people, I mean, there's no paper that runs now without a horoscope in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolute nonsense, but people love believing in it. So you wonder why, as a species, we have this kind of preference for nonsense.
Again, listeners can find your very interesting article. It's at The Punch, thepunch.com.au, and I think when they go there and they just search for your name, Rob Morrison, they'll find that article. There is a string of comments going on forever, being posted up by people who are less than complimentary about what you've said, but you've certainly got a stack of supporters in there agreeing with or backing up your statements.
And that, I must say, humbly, is to my surprise. I thought I'd be flamed off the pages, but most of the people responding agree. And many of them are very cheesed off when they pay their rapidly increasing medical benefits bill, that some of it is subsidizing this nonsense, because the medical benefits group want to get as many people in as they can, so they'll adopt all these alternative bits of nonsense and charge us and the government for the privilege of doing so.
Yeah, it's a commercial decision, to be sure.
Yeah, a lot of the respondents, in fact, don't like that, and good on them.
Good on them. And this is another, incidentally, it's another push that we at Australian Skeptics are pursuing, is to try and get health funds to realise the folly of this. But that's another battle. It's somewhat connected, I suppose, but it's another story.
Well, it is connected, and it's one that we are starting to look at. We've got an awful lot of people who want to be behind this campaign, and we're steadily, I think, building a voice, and I hope that voice will be influential enough to tackle some of these problems, because too many people have tackled it as individuals. Good on them, but you don't get a government to listen easily when you're an individual. So I hope we can get some universities and prestigious bodies and people who know what they're talking about saying enough is enough. I mean, look, we've already got 14 universities offering these courses. What's happening to our university standards? I mean, they do it because there's a quid in it, but it's not a healthy development.
Yes, there's a university just recently offering a course in energy medicine, the study of energy medicine. Yeah,
well, the one that triggered this is the CQU in Queensland is about to offer a chiropractic course next year, and that's really, I think, triggered the reaction that got this round started.
And of course, Rob, there are other people involved in this campaign too.
Yes, and you can find some of their contributions on the other websites that are a bit like The Punch. There's mine on The Punch. There's Loretta on Crikey. I think Alistair McLennan, very well-versed in this problem. He's got one on The Conversation. And a great deal of reaction to all of them. So it would be a good debate for people who are interested in this to get involved in, particularly those who are getting anxious about the kind of loss of focus of evidence-based practices in Australia and how they're being subverted.
All right, Rob. Well, I'll certainly include all those links on the show notes and in our newsletter, which go out with the Skeptic Zone. Thank you once again, and I can't help thinking that if the Curiosity Show was still on air, that more primary school kids would be better versed in science.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Rob Morrison, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
You're listening to Septoid. I'm Brian Donut from Septoid.com, the tap-dancing Madonna of Aguas, Calientes. In 1953, while on a unicycle preaching tour of the Guatemalan highlands, 2 nuns reported a mysterious phenomenon at a roadside shrine. Before their astonished eyes, a statue of the Virgin Mary appeared to come to life, climb down from its plinth, and deliver messages from Jesus, while simultaneously performing tap routines from classic Hollywood musicals. The stunned nuns, Sisters Gracias por Nada and Dolores de Cabeza, recounted their experience to the local bishop, who listened intently, then had the 2 committed to a home for the bewildered. But word of the vision soon spread. Before long, thousands were flocking to the shrine, just outside the village of Nolo Creo. Over the following weeks, believers claimed the Virgin expanded her repertoire to include everything from flamenco to classical ballet. Dozens of miracles were attributed to the Virgin, People who had previously exhibited no dancing ability whatsoever were suddenly expert in intricate rambas, exuberant salsas, and, much to the dismay of the local clergy, steamy tangos. But what did the observers really see? Did a stone statue of Mary really come to life and dance before an enraptured audience? Well, of course not. It's a load of horse shit.
Hi, this is Tim Farley. You probably know me from whatstheharm.net, a catalog of the real-world harm caused by lack of critical thinking. But that's not my only project. I present at Skeptic events. I post a daily Skeptic history fact on Twitter and Facebook. And I blog about using new techniques on the internet to advance skepticism. Come over to skeptools.com and check out my latest ideas. But first, enjoy the rest of the Skeptic Zone.
And I'm pleased that once again, as we do over the years, we've caught up with Dr. Paul Willis, now happily ensconced in the beautiful city of Adelaide. Hello, Paul.
How are you, Richard?
I'm doing really well, but more importantly, how are you now that you're no longer the great front man for the ABC science television show Catalyst?
Makes me sound impregnable. Look, absolutely loving Adelaide. And the position I've got here as director of the Royal Institution is fantastic. It's an opportunity unparalleled opportunities to talk science to the world, but particularly to Australians. And just try and weave science into the fabric of our society, and rational thoughts in there and skeptical thoughts in there and all those things that mean so much to me. I get to play with them all. It's a good job.
It sounds like the ideal job for you, but I do know that you had a very long and successful career on ABC television, and I know you enjoyed that too.
Oh, yeah, look, I was at the ABC for 14 years. Most of that was on television, first of all in Quantum, and then 10 years on Catalyst. And it was a hell of a trip, We did lots of interesting stories, went to lots of interesting places. But to be honest, after 10 years, it was time for something different, time to explore new horizons, and this opportunity is exactly that. It's a chance to do something similar but different, time to do something a bit creative. It's just a logical progression in my career.
It sounds like a very good move indeed, and we'll get back onto more about what you're doing down there in Adelaide soon. Just to recap, because when we do catch up with you, for some reason, I don't know why, the subject of creationism comes up. Now, I'm just going to play a little clip of you and I chatting 10 years ago, and this is from the days of Net FM, when I did a show with good old Stefan Soika.
A good test, if I can just bung this one in, because this one comes from paleontology. For a long time, the creationists has been saying, well, something as complicated as a bird's wing, like half a wing's not going to work, so you can't have half a bird's wing. And so, therefore, you evolutionists, show me half a bird's wing, and I'll believe that they evolved from something else.
Yep.
Only in 1999, Caudipteryx was found in China. It's a small dinosaur with half a wing.
Bird's wing.
It's like God's on our side. He's actually giving us all the good evidence.
Hallelujah! Hallelujah!
Just suck it to these guys.
Send those creationists to hell.
Then they say, well, okay, so no, it's a bird that's lost its, that's lost its wing. That doesn't make any sense either.
It's a mutant
because it's also got a reptile's tail. It's got a reptile's skull. It's got all of these dinosaur features. If it didn't have the feathers on it, then we wouldn't know that it was had any bird affinity.
There you go. So all those people out there, when the Christian Science bus comes your way,
The creationist science.
Creationist.
Let's not put the word science in there at all. Let's just take that away from them.
When the creationist bus comes your way, get out your eggs and hurl them.
Yes, and say, Caudipteryx, you swine! Caudipteryx!
Caudipteryx egg!
So, Paul, that was 10 years ago when you were heavily involved in battling the creationists and throwing eggs at them, or whatever the case may be. What's changed in the last 10 years in the great fight that we have against these people?
I hate to say I was right, but it's actually got worse.
because particularly in the United States, they're garnering all kinds of political support. In the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of intelligent design, which is just creationism in a cheap tuxedo.
That's what they say, yeah.
Yeah, and they're quite well resourced, and it's like that game. What do you call them? Whack-a-mole, where you try and whack them. And every time you hit one, two others pop up. And I've always said that we will never win against the creationists, but if we stop fighting, we will lose.
Yeah,
and it's a loss we cannot afford. It's hard enough to educate kids as to what is and what isn't science and what is and what isn't rational thinking. And when you stir into the science classroom, or any classroom, the whole gobbledygook mixed-up bag of illogical and fallacious wrong arguments that is creationism, it's creating a handicap for the whole of society.
That's very true. And it's all the more galling when you think and consider, over the last 10 years since we originally spoke on the subject, the advances and the discoveries that must have been made.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the clip you just played about Cordipteryx, since that went to air 10 years ago, I still can't believe it's 10 years. You and I actually look younger, Richard.
We do.
But, since that time, a whole load more fossils have come out of that deposit, Liaoning in China. And every conceivable stage, from a small furry dinosaur through to a fully fledged bird, every conceivable step of the way is preserved there. Not just in the skeletons, but also in the development of feathers themselves. Yeah, you couldn't ask for more intermediate forms to demonstrate how one form got to another form. And yet you may as well be trying to convince a creationist that the sky's red.
Or as you once said, it's like trying to nail jelly to a wall.
It is. They are immune to reason. They are immune to rational argument. It actually takes a Herculean effort to overturn that mindset, because you're not just trying to establish a few facts, you're actually trying to completely rework their whole worldview. That's no small job. I haven't found the formula for doing that yet.
Now, let's get back to what you're doing at the moment. So you made the big move from the big smoke here in Sydney to the not so big smoke in Adelaide.
Yep.
But I guess one of the advantages of that is no more Sydney traffic jams.
Yeah, well, my wife kind of put it very well when we came back to Sydney for a weekend visit about 6 weeks after we arrived in Adelaide. And on the Saturday I said to her, so what's it like coming back to Sydney? And she said, well, it's a bit like going out to lunch with an old boyfriend. On the drive there, you're thinking, things won't be so bad. You know, we had a great time together. You never know, we might get lucky. Things might spark off again. And then halfway through lunch, you know why you dropped in. We didn't even get out of the airport in Sydney and we were stuck in a traffic jam. I'm still yet to experience one here in Adelaide. But look, I could bang on about Adelaide until the cows come home, but the only thing you need to know, Richard, is that within an hour of me here in the middle of Adelaide are 300 of the best cellar doors on the planet.
Of course.
What other reason do you need to live here?
Now, tell me more about what you're doing professionally there.
Well, the Royal Institution, this is the first time that a sister organisation of the Royal Institution in Great Britain has been set up. Now, they've been going for 212 years. They're responsible for 10 elements on the periodic table, including sodium, and 14 Nobel Prizes. We've been going since 2007, and so we haven't got any elements or any Nobel Prizes.
Well, not yet.
But it gives us something to aim for.
Yeah.
And principally, the easy way to think about it is not a lot of people, particularly in Australia, have heard of the Royal Institution in Great Britain. But it's kind of, in a way, a companion organisation to the Royal Society. Right. The Royal Society is about doing science. The Royal Institution is about communicating science. And the way that most people would, or anybody who's spent any time in England would know of the Royal Institution, are the Christmas lectures that are held every year on the BBC. And these actually go back to Faraday. He used to give the original Christmas lectures at the Royal Institution in London. And every year, a celebrated scientist will give, I think there's 6 in a series, lectures over the Christmas break on a particular area of science. Well, anyway, to cut a long story short, South Australia was the first place to get the first sister organisation of the RI, and so far the only. As I said, we started in 2007. We've been in this magnificent building that you can see behind me here.
Yes, I should tell our listeners that we're actually videoing each other at the moment. So I can see various people wandering past you in the corridor carrying strange objects.
Yeah, you're not seeing the building at its best, but we've been in here since 2009, and it's the original stock exchange building for Adelaide. The building was built in 1901. At great expense, we've been able to redevelop half the building with all the latest technology, and essentially we've got a fully automated television studio which can broadcast live to the internet in high definition on a 5-camera switched feed.
Wow.
So that's become the centre of our outreach. You know, we can have, well, if I can give you an example, on Tau Day, so the 28th of the 6th, which is Tau, which is the circumference of a circle divided by the radius instead of the diameter. You know, the things that maths nerds get off on.
Right.
Well, Tau Day, we had some musicians from the Elder Conservatorium come over and perform some musical pieces inspired by mathematics, including the first 130 places of Tau put to music, right? It was a Tuesday lunchtime, and we had a live audience downstairs of 6. But because we could record it live to the internet, or put it out live to the internet and then putting up a recording of that, we actually scored more than 10,000 hits worldwide within 24 hours.
That's worthwhile, yeah.
You know, the thought that there's someone in Colombia tuning into avant-garde music coming out of my auditorium in less than a day, that's the power of what we can do here. So we're developing all sorts of stuff. And if I can just put in a big plug here to you listeners, look, tune into the RIO's website, because we have an event every week at least, sometimes 2 events a week, that go live to the internet. And so you've got Q&A style forums where you can actually feed back into it in real time, no matter where you are. You can feed your questions to our panel. Like we just this week we had a really good discussion on world population and how many people can the world take, and what are the trends in world population, why is the world population, all this sort of stuff we're able to air in a town hall style across the country. So do tune in, have a look at what we're up to, and I'm going to give the URL. Don't edit this bit.
Go for it.
RIAUS. That's riaus.org.au. Bookmark the site and come back, folks, because we're going to be doing lots of interesting stuff in the future.
Well, that certainly will be a site worth bookmarking, and I'll put that out on the newsletter and in the show notes just in case you didn't get that. But, of course, since we're going to repeat it before the end of the interview, I'm sure you will. But it sounds like you've been having a successful time. You haven't been there too long, but I can see that you're already settling in. How else can the public become involved?
Well, if you're not in Adelaide, then you need to get into our Facebook sites and other online social activities in order to keep up with what we're doing. And as I said, there are ways over the internet of interacting live with what we do. And, of course, there's an open invitation to you and the Skeptics. I want you guys over here to do a show that we can put live out across Australia and maybe turn into a DVD that can be circulated. So are you interested, sir?
You don't have to ask me twice, Paul. That sounds like an excellent project sometime in 2012 when I'm not in some far-flung corner of the earth.
Globe-trotting a lot. I've been following your tweets and I'm trying to figure out which continents you haven't been to.
Antarctica.
Yeah, no, been there, done that.
Yeah, how many times?
7.
What? You're kidding. You've been to Antarctica 7 times?
Yeah, it's cold.
Really?
Yeah.
You shock me.
That's what you need to know.
And just a side note to that, of course, you were telling me once, it could have even been your first trip down there, you walking along and you found, was it a plesiosaur or something wonderful?
Yeah. Oh, we found plesiosaurs down there, incredible fossils. If you go to the right places, they're, are untouched fossil fields, just bristling with all sorts of interesting marine creatures and that. Also stumbled across a meteorite a couple of years back. And unfortunately I couldn't collect it at that time, and by the time I got back there, couldn't relocate that specific specimen, found some other stuff that I thought was meteorite, collected about 2 kilos and lugged them all the way back to Australia, and no, they were actually just rocks. But the other one was a meteorite.
Yes, of course it was.
I've got photographs to prove it.
But these wonderful fields of fossils down there, you can't just go down and plunder them, can you?
No, and that's one reason why they're so fabulous. There used to be fabulous fields of fossils all over the planet, but people have gone out there and collected all the stuff off the surface. Whereas you go to a place like Seymour Island, and while a couple of, or very few paleontologists have been able to get there and do some sample collecting, most people simply can't get there. But even if you can get there, there are restrictions on you picking the stuff up and taking it away.
Yeah.
Added to that, the fact that there's no grass, there's no bushes, there's no soil. So if there's no ice, you are seeing just the fossils and the rocks. So it's a stunning thing to see.
You going back?
Unfortunately, I'm not on the schedule at the moment because I've got my hands full running this place and bringing it up to speed. But I do hope to go back one day. It's one of those places that once it's got its claws into you, they don't come out. You can put Antarctica in the buoy, but you can't take it back out again. And I'd really love to get down there. Love to take my little bloke down there and show him around. Yeah,
and me too while you're at it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, is that the time?
Yeah. Paul, the website once again.
That website is riaus.org.au.
Folks, run along to the website, have a look, enjoy the wonderful and free information and interactive information put out by the institution. And Dr. Paul Willis, a pleasure to catch up with you again. Let's do it again in another 10 years.
Well, why don't you come over to my place and we'll start investigating some of those wineries.
That sounds like a good idea. A good skeptical investigation.
Exactly.
Hi, my name is Erica Dunning, and I recently published a book. My dad is Brian Dunning from Septoid.com. The title of my book is Polar Bear and the Trial of Leadership. You can find it on Amazon.com or through the link at SkepticZone.tv. It is an adventure novel about the trials of a group of animals trying to escape a corrupt queen. This book is great for families, adolescents, and children alike. And here it is again, Polar Bear and the Trial of Leadership by Erica Dunning. Thanks!
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone once again. Don't forget, you can bid on Maynard Classics and Skeptoid 3, the whole kit and caboodle. The CD autographed by Maynard himself, and Skeptoid 3 is autographed by Brian Dunning and yours truly. That will help Maynard get to TAM 10 so he can do wonderful reports and interviews for you to enjoy and listen to. I'm still not sure who that Brian Donut was in the middle of the show. If you have an idea, why don't you tweet it? The tweet here is at Skeptic Zone. If you think you know who that might be, and I bet you don't, have a guess. Have a tweet. But until next week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.